Well, government officials will join family and friends of late former spy boss Billy Masethla to pay their last respects in Johannesburg today. He'll be laid to rest following a special provincial official funeral service this morning. Now, President Cyril Ramaphosa has also ordered that the national flag fly at half-mast in Gauteng today. Masetlha died last week following a long illness. The 68-year-old served South Africa in many roles, including as Director General of the National Intelligence Agency and as Ambassador to Algeria. Well, our reporter Govan Whittles is at the Methodist Church in Bryanston, where the funeral service is scheduled to get underway this hour. Govan, a quintessential public servant, Billy Masethla, serving both domestically and abroad, and now family and friends gathered to bid their final farewell.
Good morning. Yes, Billy Masethla was certainly someone who was at the center of some of the most significant developments in South Africa's history within the ANC and within the government. Of course, at the time of his death, he was South Africa's ambassador to Algeria, but it was his time as the National Intelligence Agency chief where a lot of his influential work was really done. Once described as former President Mbeki's point person for intelligence, he was someone who was fired by former President Mbeki after he was claimed to be involved in attempts to undermine the president by reporting that the documents submitted about an alleged plot against the former President Jacob Zuma were not the same as the documents that he had collected. Let's quickly speak to someone who's in the ANC Gauteng NEC, but also the MEC of Human Settlements in Gauteng, Mr. Lebo Maile. Mr. Maile, thank you so much for your time. Mr. Billy Masethla described himself as having been instrumental in building ANC structures in Gauteng. Of course, he said he was part of the reason why former President Mbeki got Gauteng support leading up to his election as ANC president. He certainly was someone very influential in the province, also nationally. What do you think his legacy will be for the Gauteng province?
Thank you very much for the time, and good morning to the viewers. He was indeed one of the reliable, committed cadres of our movement, who has grown through the ranks, and we have learned a lot from him, because he also contributed towards the formation of the organization Congress of South African Students. So today I have a privilege of speaking on behalf of the provincial government, and we will be able to pay tribute to the role that he has played.
He played a big role nationally, particularly in strengthening the ANC structures. And at one point he was described as one of the key organizers for the former President Thabo Mbeki's campaign to be elected. What do you think his political legacy would be in the ANC?
I think it's not about who he has supported at one point or the other, because we all have different choices when we go to conferences. But ultimately we are all ANC people. So I think for me, he was a congressman. He believed in a collective leadership. He believed in the ability of the ANC that is united to transform the lives of our people.
What expectations do you think he would have had for the mobilization of COSAS structures? Of course, he had come from the South African students movement. He had been part of the rally which took a decision to reject Afrikaans as a language of instruction. It later led to the June 7, 1976 uprising in Soweto. He described himself as having had black consciousness thinking. What do you think his expectations would be of the youth in COSAS?
He would have wanted the youth that is organized, that is conscientized, and that works systematically, and that is rooted within our communities.
Thank you so much, Mr. Lebo Maile. He'll be speaking on behalf of the provincial government here, the MEC of Human Settlements in the province. This gathering was meant to be addressed by, or at least attended by, the Premier, Panyaza Lesufi. It will also be attended by the Secretary General of the ANC, Fikile Mbalula. It's getting underway as we speak, and we do expect more dignitaries to arrive shortly. There will also be a reflection given on the influence of Billy Masethla as an ambassador, someone who the Department of International Relations had described as being rooted in Pan-Africanism. He was one of the more trusted diplomats for South Africa. And just on a side note, we see that the former president, Kgalema Motlanthe, is also in attendance. And Billy Masethla's contribution towards the country while he was intelligence chief would certainly make for interesting reflection. In a Mail and Guardian article published shortly after former President Thabo Mbeki had fired him, Billy Masethla described himself as having people in faraway governments in very high positions with 14 million rand worth of equipment, and someone who was reported to daily by a number of agents across the world. So he certainly has lived a life that has a depth of experience. He's someone who had a lot of secrets. He also described sipping single malt whiskey with former President Thabo Mbeki at one stage as they debated the intelligence dynamics across the world. And today we'll get a reflection of not only his life, but how it shaped key points in the ANC's history and, of course, the country as well.
Indeed, Govan, varying opinions there on who the man was, but of course we will continue to bring live coverage of that funeral service when it gets underway to our viewers. Former Tourism Minister, for instance, Lindiwe Sisulu, expected to also pay tribute at a later stage.